I want to just take a moment and review some of the rules governing today's forum. Each candidate will get 2 minutes for opening and closing statements, and watch for your time cues. They'll be right down there. If you can look, candidates, you'll get 1 minute, 30 seconds, and then a red card. Responses to specific questions will also be limited to 90 seconds. 30 seconds will be allotted for rebuttal at the moderator's discretion. WJZ, the Baltimore Sun, and the University of Baltimore chose the order of the candidates at random in advance of today's debate. The questions will proceed from the candidate on the left to the candidate on the right. Questions will be posed by our panel, Andrew Green, editorial page editor of the Baltimore Sun, and Dr. Ann Cotton, director of the Schaefer Center for Public Policy at the University of Baltimore, and myself, Mary Bubala of WJZ. As the moderator, I am responsible for enforcing our time limits today. I will interrupt if necessary just to keep the debate on track, our forum on track today. Candidates who received at least 2% of public support by poll results or who demonstrate formal campaign activity as defined by the Maryland League of Women Voters were asked to participate today in this forum. And the candidates are Democrat Vicki Almond, Democrat Jim Brochin, Democrat Johnny Olschewski, Johnny O, as we've seen, and Republican Pat McDonough. Republican Al Redmer Jr. has a family emergency, so he could not be here today. We have provided an area for candidates to speak with all members of the media immediately following today's forum. And we hope you find today's forum informative, and please make sure you have silenced your cell phones. We will get started. Our opening statements are going to begin, and we're going to start with Jim Brochin. Jim?
Good afternoon, and thank you, University of Baltimore and Baltimore Sun, for hosting. I was born and raised in Baltimore County, grew up in Pikesville, moved to Towson, and was an adjunct professor at CCBC and Towson University. And then I've had the privilege of representing the 42nd District in Towson and Timonium for the last 16 years. I've been a consistent champion for women's rights. I'm 100% pro-choice. Supported the Firearm Safety Act of 2013, which took guns away from those who were voluntarily or involuntarily committed into a mental health facility. And I voted on a bill in a 6-5 vote that supported taking guns away from domestic abusers if they had a protective order against them. I was also one of the deciding votes on same-sex marriage, which I think was one of the most important votes I've made in the legislature. And I've been an environmental leader in the Senate, everything from co-sponsoring the Healthy Air Act to the ban on fracking to stopping offshore drilling. I'm running for Baltimore County Executive because I want to stop pay-to-play politics in Baltimore County. We have a system where the county council, where certain members of the county council get campaign contributions from developers and developer interests, and then they get unfettered access to our land. We need more open space. We need more parks. We need more ball fields. We need more green space. We don't need to be giving out $43 million bailouts to developers when that money can be going towards building schools. As county executive, I'm going to stop pay-to-play politics. Another thing I want to do is, because it's not the only reason I'm running for county executive, is we have an opioid epidemic in the state. And in Baltimore County, we had the second highest number of opioid overdoses. I want to do what Anne Arundel County does with safe stations, where if you are in need of treatment and you're ready for treatment, you're going to be able to get treatment on demand in Baltimore County. I look forward to addressing some of the other issues during question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Almond?
Thank you. Thank you so much for hosting us today. My journey to this point has been a little bit different than most. I was raised in Catonsville, lifelong Baltimore County resident. I moved to Reisterstown some 35 years ago, married to my husband, Joe. We have 2 beautiful daughters and 6 grandchildren. And during that time, I became a community activist and a very active volunteer in schools, through PTA, in the community, through many, many different things, and as a community activist for ROG, which is an umbrella association of many community organizations. And it was during that time that I learned a lot about Baltimore County, the processes, the code enforcement, development, all sorts of things like that. And as a as it would have, I was working with Bobby Zirkin in the Senate for 4 years as his chief of staff. I was elected in 2010, and I have been on the council almost 8 years, serving as chair twice. So I believe that I really know Baltimore County politics. Local politics is very different from state and federal, of course. And I feel like I know what needs to change. I feel like I know what needs to work. There is not a pay-to-play system, and I do not like that term, and it is just not a term that is something that I will put up with anymore. So thank you for today. I'm happy to be here as Baltimore County Executive. We will have a new attitude and atmosphere, and it will be a team playing and a team running Baltimore County. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McDonough?
Well, thank you to the sponsors and to all the folks here in the auditorium and to all the folks out there watching on television. I've been traveling around the county for the past 10 months, and I'm basically asking two questions. Are you satisfied and content with the condition and the status of the county today? And the answer is always no. And I ask the question, are you confident in the future of the county and where we are headed? And the answer is no. And the reason that's happening is because there's been a 78% increase in poverty in Baltimore County in the past 10 years. There's been a 32% increase in violent crime. There's been a 35% increase in abuse and harm and bullying in our school system. Every day, a child in our school system is harmed, abused, or bullied in some way, and nothing is done about it. And we're going to change that. We have vacant boarded-up houses occurring in our neighborhoods around the Beltway, and they're growing every day, and that's going to change. Baltimore County is like a runaway train coming off a bridge. The candidates up here today are all qualified people, and they're all good people. I say that I'm different because I think they want to slow that train down. I want to stop that train, and I think the people of Baltimore County want that train stopped. My agenda is ambitious. We are going to put people first. We're going to have accountability. When your child has a problem in school, we're going to take care of it. We're going to create dramatic and powerful change in this county, and we're going to all work together to make Baltimore County America's best county. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Olschewski?
Thank you to WJZ, Baltimore Sun, University of Baltimore, voters here and watching at home. My name's Johnny Olschewski, but I hope that you'll call me Johnny O, because I believe that relationships matter, and I want you to know that I'll be an executive who is connected and accessible to you. I'm a Dundalk native, father, husband, former Baltimore County school teacher, and proud progressive Democrat. And I'm proud to be the only candidate running for county executive who fully and enthusiastically supports universal pre-K, free community college, and raising the minimum wage. I'll enact campaign finance reform too, so that we take control back from the special interests. I'm running for Baltimore County Executive because I believe our best days are still ahead. And I know we need to take bold actions to make sure we secure that future. That starts with a world-class education, and education is the cornerstone of my campaign. As a first-generation college student, I went on to earn my PhD, and education unlocked the potential of my life. It's why I became a teacher, and it's why I fought so hard for smaller class sizes and more school funding as a state delegate. It's why I'm running as the education candidate in the race for Baltimore County Executive. An Olschewski administration will also be accessible and transparent. We'll put people first, not the special interests. I'll start with a comprehensive audit of both the county and school system to identify fraud, waste, abuse, and efficiencies. We'll hold county council work sessions in the evening so that you can participate in budget hearings all around Baltimore County. And I'll bring my cabinet, one that reflects the diversity of our county, to you, with cabinet in the community meetings. As executive, I'll stand up for our core progressive values while working across the aisle to achieve solutions for everyday people. And locally, I will lead the charge in standing up to Donald Trump and his harmful and hateful agenda, because in Baltimore County, we're better than that. This campaign is about better schools, more jobs, and reforming government. I'm here to build a better Baltimore County with you, and I very much look forward to our exchange today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, candidates. Our first question comes from Andy Green, and Ms. Allman, you'll be the first to respond.
What approach would you take to the large number of deteriorating and crowded schools in Baltimore County, and how would you pay for your plan?
Thank you. One of the things that we really need to do, in my opinion, is to have a 10-year plan to figure out how we are going to pay for these schools that we desperately need, whether it's renovation, whether it's new schools, whether it's additional classrooms, whatever it may be. There has to be a plan moving forward so that we can prioritize and every year do what needs to be done to our buildings, to our infrastructure. And I think one of the most important things is having the resources for our teachers, more social workers, more nurses, more mental health advocates. And I think it's really important to take a look at our teachers to see what they need. And they tell me all the time what they need. I've been endorsed by TABCO, I've had many conversations, and I think that's where we need to start, is to make sure our teachers are able to teach, and the resources that we have to give them in order to teach the whole child. In Baltimore County, our responsibility is to teach every child, and we have to figure out how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McDonough?
Traditionally, the county executive has not played a very intensive role in education in Baltimore County because of the charter or for other reasons. I intend to go into education with both feet. If you go to my website, we have Excellence in Education, a program that goes into detail, but we are going to reduce the STAT program, K through 8, which would give us $75 million to start with. We will skim the budget, and believe me, in my opinion, it's a dishonest budget, and there's money there that we can use. And I pledge to build all 3 high schools in my first 4-year term. There are ways of doing that. They're called proto-high schools. They build them in California. You can build all 3 simultaneously and save a dramatic amount of money. I will become involved in the curriculum. We will have drug awareness, K through 12. We will have civics training, K through 12, and I will begin to phase out Common Core. We're also going to take a serious look at safety, and that may be a separate question, Andy, that you want to ask later, but we need a dramatic change in safety, student conduct. We have the same student conduct code and program in Baltimore County that they had in Florida, where the terrible tragedy occurred, and that has got to stop and change. We have to have a zero-tolerance student conduct program to protect our staff and to protect our students.
Thank you. Mr. Olschewski?
Thank you. I believe that every child in Baltimore County and every teacher in Baltimore County deserves a school that affirms their dignity and their value, and we have a long way to go to do that. As the only former teacher in this race, I'm the only one who spent time in the classroom, and as a teacher, I know what it takes to improve the quality of our school system. Education is my passion and my priority. I'm proud to have unveiled a plan for up to $2 billion of infrastructure investment across Baltimore County so that we address the awful conditions that persist: brown drinking water, crumbling infrastructure, overcrowding. I'll do that in a multitude of ways. First and foremost, investments matter, and having the best schools, not just in the state, but in the country, will sustain our tax base. It will grow our tax base. I'll also partner with the state, as we partnered with Baltimore City to enact a 21st Century Schools program. We'll do the same thing for Baltimore County so that we can invest in our infrastructure. We'll also get our priorities right in Baltimore County, and we'll focus on schools instead of developer handouts and bailouts at the tune of $43 million. And we'll emphasize our basic needs before we worry about giving $300 million to put laptops in the hands of first graders. Finally, in my audit process, for every 1% of efficiency and waste that we identify, we'll have over $30 million annually to reinvest into the residents of Baltimore County.
Thank you. Mr. Brochin?
I think there's a few things. First of all, it is the laptop program, which is now from first grade through 12th grade, and it's not evidence-based. So you go and speak to a lot of elementary school teachers, and they tell you that elementary school kids are not paying attention to the teachers. They're paying attention, they're looking at the laptops. So I do think under a Brochin administration, we'll have 5 or 6 learning stations in elementary schools, but we can save about $30 or $40 million by taking them out of every kid's hand and just having them in stations. And as a result, we can use that money to build more schools. But the second piece is overdevelopment again. I've been campaigning all over Baltimore County, and you speak to so many residents, And they say, look at that, there used to be 5 or 10 acres of open space and green space now, and now there's 70 or 80 more homes crammed in there. Not only do those homes bring congested roadways, which all of us are familiar with in Baltimore County, but they bring overcrowded schools. Somebody needs to say no. The next county executive needs to look at the developers and say, no, you're not going to build on this last piece of open space so we can keep overcrowding our schools. So unchecked development is hurting us, and it's the taxpayer bailouts. It's not just the $43 million to Towson Row, but it was another $35 million of water and sewer that we laid for them at the corner of Towson Town Boulevard and York Road, which added $35 million more to the project and could have gone to build more schools. We have to stop giving bailouts to developers, and we need to start building schools.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Dr. Cotton, and Mr. McDonough, you go first.
Baltimore County is approaching the limits of its ability to issue new debt, and Moody's recently revised its outlook for the county credit rating from stable to negative. Can the county continue to meet its needs without raising taxes?
Well, I'm not going to raise taxes. I pledge that to the people under any circumstances. We have to look at our spending priorities, number one. Number two, the budget. How do you read a budget which, in my opinion, is dishonest, that you can't really find out where money is? I've talked to Steve Shue, the Anne Arundel County Executive, who's supporting me, and he's kind of a money expert guy. And he told me, your budget is a mess. There is more money in there than you think. It's a lot of it going to the wrong spending priorities. So we're going to take a very close look at that budget. We're going to audit that budget. We may even investigate that budget. But we are going to find out where the priorities need to be as to what the people want. In addition to that, we are going to increase revenue and wealth. The poverty, which I mentioned earlier, we have been transferring and importing poverty into Baltimore County. It's about time we have a county executive that begins to work on importing economic growth and money and people who can afford better housing. That's what we need in Baltimore County. But I promise you, I will never come close to raising taxes during my 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Olschewski.
Sure, thank you. Our current county leadership has allowed our county to get to the point where our credit card is maxed out. And responsible leaders are honest about that and take credit for it. And I do think there's a way that we can meet the needs of our school system without turning directly to taxes. I think it's an old way of thinking, and this campaign represents a new way of thinking and a new way forward for Baltimore County. As I mentioned in the question about school construction, I do think that by growing our county, both in terms of residents and also adding property values, we will increase our tax base. We can partner not just with the state, but with the private sector, as I did as a state legislator, to bring more jobs and more opportunity and economic development to Baltimore County. We have to get our priorities right with our spending. We have to think about what is the most important thing, and we can find, as I said, up to $30 million annually for every 1% in waste, fraud, abuse, and efficiencies we identify. You know, in addition to maxing out the credit card, we've also had incredibly missed opportunities where the current leadership could have explored things like developer impact fees and other ways to have revenue to support our needs across Baltimore County. That hasn't happened. It's time for new, bold leadership in Baltimore County, and Olschewski administration will do just that.
Thank you, Mr. Brochin.
We need to do two things. The first thing we need to do is we need to keep incentivizing companies to come here by being flexible. I was chairman of the Baltimore County Senate delegation for the last 3 years and helped bring Guinness to Relay, Maryland, which is right next to Arbutus. There are 2 Guinness facilities in the entire world. One is in Dublin, Ireland, and now one is in Baltimore County, Maryland. The economic development impact of Guinness is profound, and they've done beautiful work, and we were able to pass that unanimously. The second thing is that if we really want to work on increasing our tax base and bringing up our credit rating, let's invest, as we've spoken about, in good schools and open space. Let's have parks and ball fields and rec centers that are first class, that match what Howard County has. I hear more complaints as I go across and speak to constituents about our rundown fields and about other things that go on as far as upkeep goes. We can have first class facilities, a lot of open space in parks and ball fields and rec centers, and reinvest money in education and put that money into education to have first-class schools. I can tell you in my district, people are flooding in to go to Rogers Forge Elementary School or West Towson Elementary School. Good schools help drive economic development, which helps drive growth, which makes our tax base stronger.
Thank you, Ms. Allman.
Thank you. We need to keep 10% of our surplus in order to keep our AAA bond rating. And by having that bond rating, we are able to borrow money at a much less fee than we would normally do. So that surplus is not to be used, and it has to stay the way it is. In order to take the money to do our schools, to improve them, to build new schools, whatever it is we have to do, we need an economic base. And that starts with economic development. With economic development, you bring in jobs, you bring in people, you bring money into our communities, just as I did with Foundry Row. And I went against many developers in order to do Foundry Row, and that has become an economic engine for Owings Mills and Newtown, and it has also been able to have more notice to Reisterstown Road and to some of the vacant buildings that are on there. We're hoping, and we've just passed legislation, to be able to use some of those larger vacant buildings that we have all over the county and be able to use them for other things, like rec and parks, like indoor basketball, like family recreation. I've also passed a tourism bill, which will bring 8% of the 8% hotel tax into Baltimore County, and that will be a revenue generator. So I do believe that we need to have economic development as part of the plan moving forward.
Thank you. The next question is, do you support the federal housing discrimination settlement the Kamenetz administration agreed to? Do you support a ban on source of income discrimination for renters? And we're going to start with you, Mr. Olschewski.
Sure. I believe that discrimination in any form is wrong, and that leadership stands up to fight it in every way possible. I'm proud to have been the only candidate, and I believe the only candidate still, to support ending housing discrimination in Baltimore County. I throw my entire support behind the housing consent decree and will enact that as county executive. I also will work with the new council to make sure that we finally outlaw this awful practice of allowing housing discrimination. You know, you could look back any number of years in our county, in our state's history, in our country's history, and you could replace source of income with race or gender or sex. That's wrong. That's not leadership. Leaders fight back and push back against discrimination. I'm proud to have taken a hard stand on this issue in this race. I think it is a key differentiator between me and the other candidates. And as county executive, we will end housing discrimination in Baltimore County.
Thank you, Mr. Brochin.
First of all, we have a consent decree from the federal government, and as county executive, I'm going to adhere to that consent decree and follow the rules that are established by it. I think one of them is submitting legislation back to the county council, which I will do. With that being said, I think the best way to attack the affordable housing crisis in Baltimore County is if there is new housing. If there is new housing in certain areas, in order to be able to get a permit for new housing, a certain amount would have to be set aside for affordable housing, a certain percentage. I think that's the pragmatic way to do it. I think it helps us get to our goals. And as I speak about open space, and dedicating more land to open space, the place where we're going to have new housing is probably going to be in more urbanized areas, like the center of Towson, like if we do the Reisterstown Road corridor where the Armory is, and redeveloping the Liberty Road corridor as well. So that's where we'll hopefully establish new housing in those corridors, and that's where we'll make sure that you won't be able to get a permit unless a certain amount of it is set aside for affordable housing.
Thank you, Ms. Allman.
Yes, thank you. Part of taking care of this issue is relationships and partnerships. And I do believe that the consent decree has to be met. But I do believe also that as we are redeveloping, and that is going to be the new thing in Baltimore County moving forward, we're going to be redeveloping a lot of our older apartment buildings, our older strip malls, and things like that. And if we do have a percentage of new development that is spread around the county, that's the way to do source of income. And I think it's important that it isn't in just one area where you're creating poverty instead of helping to get rid of poverty. So that would be the way that I would do it, in relationship and in partnership with the developers that are also putting money and investing in our communities and who can be open to new ideas.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough.
Well, I would immediately direct the county law department to launch a lawsuit to eliminate the judicial edict and get rid of it. Number one, I think it's a very sloppy piece of legislation, and it was not really negotiated by the previous county executive. He just sort of caved in on it, and I don't think we should be operating under a judicial edict. Secondly, we are going to declare a moratorium on all new Section 8 housing in Baltimore County and create an impact commission of citizens to study the impact that this housing has had on the county, the costs of education, the costs of poverty. I mentioned the 78% increase in poverty. Almost 90% of these vouchers come from Baltimore City. They do not come from poverty in Baltimore County. We have done our part. Baltimore City has something like 25,000 vouchers. We are approaching that voucher. And even the mayor has said in her remarks, I don't want people to leave the city. I want them to stay in the city. But they're coming to the county. But the other half of this is we need to promote a housing program in Baltimore County that brings in wealth and success, senior villages, condos for people who can afford them, upscale housing for working and middle-class family. We cannot continue to import poverty. We must import economic growth and success.
Thank you. Our next question is from Andy Green, and it goes to Mr. Brochin.
Does Baltimore County strike an appropriate balance between the interests of developers and communities?
Well, I think I've answered that a few times, but the answer is absolutely not. What we've done with development in the last 30 years is incredibly problematic for Baltimore County citizens. And you can take it across the Beltway. You can go from the Pantheon development in Catonsville to Chestnut Ridge in my opponent's district, to Lake Roland, also in my opponent's district, to Towson Manor Park in my district, which I helped save. We have given developers basically everything they want, and somebody needs to say enough. So if we don't stop, the roads are going to be so overcrowded that you may live 10 or 15 miles from work, but it's going to take you an hour to get home. And as far as schools go, they're just going to get more overcrowded. We need to not just stop the balance, we need to push back and reverse it. And if development is such a good idea, let's take campaign contributions out of them. It's a piece of legislation I put in 2 years ago, which is if you have a development project in a certain councilmanic district, you may not give a campaign contribution to that council person or the county executive in the preceding 3 years. If you do, you have to give it back. So development projects will be based on their merit. It's a piece of legislation that I emulated that's been law in Prince George's County for 25 years. It works a heck of a lot better than ours. I'm going to stop overdevelopment in this county, and we're going to curb it greatly as far as making sure that it's just in urbanized areas.
Thank you, Ms. Allman.
Yes, thank you. Leadership is tough, and we have had to make very, very tough decisions. My style of leadership when I have an issue with developers, with community, is to bring them all in the same room, to communicate, to negotiate, to figure out some way where we can all work together for the best of the community. And that's not always easy, but we do make tough decisions. Baltimore County is not corrupt. The council is not corrupt. We do not take money from developers for anything, for pay to play, for anything. And I have to say that most people on this stage have taken money from developers, from community people, from special interest groups, but it doesn't mean you're giving something back. It just means that they want to see you elected to the office because they know you're fair, because they know you will work with them, communicate with them. It's all about those relationships and those partnerships. Do we need more rec and parks? Yes. Do we need a whole new plan for development in Baltimore County? Yes. But as I said before, redevelopment is going to be a large part of the future of Baltimore County, and we need investors in Baltimore County to make those things happen and to increase our tax base.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough.
Well, Jim is right. There is that powerful influence by certain developers, but he doesn't go far enough. There is a shadow government or a powerful influential force in the background in Baltimore County beyond developers that gave us Dallas Dance and give us situations where the people don't really participate, like a school board that I helped to make into a hybrid elected school board, which takes over in November. Make no mistake, I'm going to build. But I'm going to build, when it comes to having study groups and the community involved, I'm going to build an arena in Baltimore County. I'm going to build a world-class convention hotel in Baltimore County because we need that. That's a big project. It'll be financed by private interests. There are private interests that want to come into Baltimore County and do this job. It will create jobs. It will create excitement in Baltimore County. So we will build, but we will build with the people's consent and with transparency, and we will put people first, and we will run an honest government. But we will build where necessary, including housing, to bring more general people into the county that have economic means. There's a project in my district right now on condos that sell for $500,000, and they're selling like hotcakes. That's what we will build to bring economic strength to Baltimore County.
Thank you, Mr. Olszewski.
Thank you. I believe that we need to put residents front and center in the development process in Baltimore County, and that we do not currently balance the interests of our residents across Baltimore County. An Olszewski administration will not ever say, developers give you money to give you access, like one of my opponents has said. An Olszewski administration will enact meaningful campaign finance reform so that we take all special interests off the table. It's a public option to address those special interests, just like we've passed in Montgomery County and Howard County, and how we elected our governor in the state of Maryland. We also need leadership that's going to fundamentally reform the process by how citizens are engaged. We have a county council that voted against moving work sessions from the middle of the day to the evening so that people can more meaningfully participate in their government. We need to better inform residents about projects in their district, give them more opportunities to provide feedback, and work with them. And I think the HOME Act is actually a great example of where bold leadership and strong leadership will stand up to those special interests that have given tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars and oppose the issue and say, you know what, discrimination is wrong. And it is about deconcentrating poverty. We have allowed poverty to fester. That's the whole point of the HOME Act. But you need a leader who's willing to stand up and say discrimination is wrong, campaign finance is needed, and Johnny Olszewski will make sure that happens in Baltimore County.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Dr. Cotton, and Ms. Allman will be the first to respond.
What lessons do you draw from the killing last month of Baltimore County police officer Amy Caprio, in which 4 Baltimore teens have been charged with murder?
We have had some difficult times in Baltimore County over the last month or so. And when Officer Caprio was murdered, that was a very sad day for Baltimore County. We have a lot of work to do in our public safety. As a community activist, before I was a council person, I initiated the School Resource Officer Program, which is in our middle and high schools. And we will have a form of that in our elementary schools moving forward. But we have to have a relationship with the city council, in order to be able to keep our streets safe and to make Baltimore City safer. We have let our children down in many cases, and we have to stop that. And it's all going to take communication, building relationships with our state partners, with our city partners, to be able to keep crime not just out of the county, but keep crime out of the city as well. We are not an island in Baltimore County. We are surrounded by the city, by different counties, and we have to work together with them on this public safety issue.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough.
We have allowed younger generations from in the home to the school to the streets to do bad things without consequences. And I'm not going to permit that in Baltimore County. In Baltimore County, I am the chief law enforcement officer. I appoint the chief of police, and I will decide on deployment. We will use the New York model, which is the best police department in the United States. That will be our guidelines. We will have at least 20 police centers spread around the county outside of these big precincts into the county. The New York factor is that you know everybody in the neighborhood, you know all the business owners, and you know when Bubba's in town, and you know what Bubba is up to. I will also incorporate the federal government to go after the MS-13 gangs with strike forces and to go after the heroin problem. In addition to that, I will employ a juvenile curfew under the right circumstances, and we will have a constitutional zero-tolerance approach. We're not going to put up with any nonsense in Baltimore County. If you come into Baltimore County or you live in Baltimore County and you want to create a crime or a problem for your neighbor, you will be answerable. You will never hear County Executive McDonough usher the words or issue the words, "Stand down."
Thank you, Mr. Olszewski.
My heart breaks for the family of Officer Caprio, the entire police department in Baltimore County, and law enforcement across the state. It was a very sobering experience to attend her funeral alongside my brother, who is a police officer in Baltimore County. In the wake of that experience, I think we need to ask ourselves, what can we do better to help prevent it from happening again? And as a county executive, there are several things that I would like to do to help prevent that from happening again. First and foremost is to invest in our officers more, to hire more officers so that they have more support, can be partnered up, can be more engaged in community policing, that we offer them more training so that they, as they engage difficult circumstances, they're as best equipped as they possibly can be. To support them with the most recent and helpful technology, and to also partner regionally so that we are sharing data and using analytics to understand the likelihood of danger in a situation or where crimes will be in the future. I'd also just point out that her unfortunate passing points out that we need to look at the underlying systems that have allowed that to happen in the first place. And as county executive, I'll take a holistic solution to criminal justice, not just addressing the police department, but schools and social needs across our county and across our region.
Thank you, Mr. Brochin.
Johnny's right. It was absolutely one of the most heartbreaking funerals I've been to, and to stand across and see police officers in their 20s shedding tears was tough. I've been sitting on the Judicial Proceedings Committee for 14 of my 16 years. I read a book about a decade ago called Last Chance in Texas. It's a book on how to take the recidivism rate and drop it by 2/3. Texas uses it, Missouri uses a model of it, Massachusetts uses a model of it. It's dealt around a juvenile diversion program. It's an 18-month program. If you're not in for a sexual assault or murder, you're eligible. And what it does is you go to school for 5 hours a day, you have to participate in some type of sport or activity, and you enter a specialized program where you learn the actions of your consequences. If the victim or the victim's family agrees to meet with you, you meet with them for a prolonged period of time and understand the havoc that you've wreaked, and you work through it. A lot of people say this 18 months is tougher than spending 5 or 10 years in jail. And at the end of it, we don't leave you alone. We give you 18 months afterwards and aftercare and follow-up and the specialized services that you're going to need to succeed. If you choose not to be in that program, or you have a major infraction when you're in that program, you go and serve your sentence, because in the beginning, in exchange for the diversion program, you have a guilty plea. Speak to every expert, look at everything that's evidence-based. Juvenile diversion programs have to start. They have to start now. And as Baltimore County Executive, I'll be happy to start a pilot program so we can start it in Baltimore County.
Thank you. Our next question: the opioid epidemic continues to impact Maryland families across all socioeconomic lines. Governor Hogan declared a state of emergency and created a heroin and opioid task force to address this serious issue. Do you think his efforts go far enough, and what would your approach be to this issue? Mr. McDonough, you're up first.
Well, this is one issue that I have to say that the Democrats, the Republicans, everybody pretty much is in the same boat, and they are working hard and trying to come up with ideas, and that's a good thing. My personal opinion about this, there's 2 points that need to be made. Prevention is the key to solution. That's why I want to have a drug awareness program in K through 12 in Baltimore County education system, because people's minds as they get older, from youth to high school, it changes, and they have to be taught in different ways about how serious and how bad this is. So we need an education program to assist the prevention part. The other part is, frankly, I don't believe we are hitting the MS-13 component. The MS-13 people are the suppliers. We do not have a federal strike force. I will go to sessions and go to the Trump administration, and I will say, this county is wide open. Send in ICE. Send in the federal strike forces. I will do all in my power. I don't see anything in the newspaper, the Baltimore Sun or anyplace else, about MS-13 people getting locked up. I see the little dealers in the neighborhoods getting locked up. MS-13 must be eliminated, and I will do all in my power to kill the source of this chemical warfare being conducted upon the citizens of Baltimore County. Prevention, education, tough, smart law enforcement. That's the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Olschewski.
Thank you. I believe that we should do all that we can to help those struggling with addiction and prevent those who may become addicted from doing so in the first place. I applaud the governor for drawing attention to the importance of this issue, along with legislative leaders like Senator Kathy Klausmeyer and Delegate Eric Bromwell, who have both endorsed our candidacy. In addition to a lot of the good work that's being done across the state in education, in treatment funding, one of the places where I think we can really accelerate and make more progress in Baltimore County is by better leveraging data and analytics to understand the problem, whether that is identifying the data to help us find out who's being a pill mill, which doctors are overprescribing, to identify risk factors for doctors to say, this person might be at risk because of behavior, to better analyze outcomes so that we're not just throwing money at treatment, but that we are doing so in a way that ensures that that treatment is actually leading to the outcomes that we seek for our residents. And then also, it's important that Baltimore County continue to grow our treatment beds. I think the Cabinet's administration made a good first step by announcing that we were going to have a treatment facility here in Baltimore County. We have to grow that, we have to expand that, and we have to accelerate the schedule by which it gets open so that we can put people into treatment options.
Thank you. Mr. Brochin?
We do need to build a first-class treatment center in Baltimore County. I agree. I think the Cabinet's administration towards the end made a good commitment. I think we need to do something on the east side also and expand beds. But as I mentioned before, I'm intrigued by what Steve Shue has done in Anne Arundel County with safe stations. I've spoken to him about it, and as I said in my opening, when you're ready for treatment, and as I go across the county and I go across my district, you see heads nodding because you have to be ready for treatment. Because the havoc that it's wreaking on families and friends is off the charts. But when you're ready, when I'm Baltimore County Executive, you will be able to go to a police station, you will be able to go to a fire station, you will be met by a Baltimore County caseworker, and you will get treatment on demand. Whether it's inpatient or outpatient, until the facilities are built, we will contract with existing facilities. Knowing that treatment doesn't work the first, second, or third time, knowing that it's an investment, but if you're willing, Baltimore County is going to be willing, and we're going to take, a lot of people don't know this, but we're really going to try and end this scourge because Baltimore County has the second highest number of overdoses in the state of Maryland, and the stories are just absolutely tragic.
Thank you. Ms. Almond?
Yes, thank you. Baltimore County is already trying to provide people with information about opioids. Under the leadership of Dr. Branch with our Baltimore County Health Department, we have a program called REACH. And part of that program is when people who are addicted come into hospitals, we are alerted, and it is a peer-to-peer process where addicts who have been clean will help with these folks who are addicted and try and get them into a facility immediately, not just treat them and send them back into the street. And we are developing the safe houses in the police departments and in the fire stations as well. But I think our REACH program is very proactive in the opioid epidemic, and I believe that Baltimore County is well on its way to helping with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final question of the day comes from Andy Green, and Mr. Olschewski, you start.
What would you do as county executive to improve safety in our schools, and what role, if any, does gun control play in that?
Thank you, Andy. As I mentioned a couple times, once or twice, I'm proud to be the only teacher in this race for Baltimore County Executive. And I see the issue of schools, and including school safety, through the eyes of a teacher, school board member, and father of a 2-year-old daughter. I think there's a lot more that we can and we must do for school safety. A lot of that deals with what we do on the front end, though, and recognizing that a lot of the issues that we see across this country are the festering of unaddressed issues, which is why, as part of my platform for Baltimore County Executive, I called for hiring more teachers so that class sizes are smaller and teachers can better know their students, more counselors, psychologists, pupil personnel workers, and social workers. Because in Baltimore County, we're anywhere from 2 to 10 times behind the national recommendations for our staffing levels. So we have to get that right first. We also have to invest in school safety mechanisms to make sure that in the event of the unthinkable, we do have preventative measures in place. We have to invest that infrastructure cost because all of these trailers across Baltimore County that are not only overcrowding our schools are soft targets and make our schools unsafe. And absolutely, we need, and I will fight for, sensible, common sense gun reform in Baltimore County, as I testified on the Councilwoman's recent legislation, in the state of Maryland and across this country.
Thank you, Mr. Brochin.
So this year, as a member of the legislature, I supported the governor's bill to add $51 million more for school safety measures. It's a small component. It's a start. As a member of the legislature over the last 16 years, I'm the only candidate standing here who supported the Firearms Safety Act of 2013, which took guns away from those who were involuntarily or voluntarily committed into a mental health facility, and really those most likely to do the unthinkable. I also supported a bill in 2009 which was as crucial, which said if you're a domestic abuser and you have a protective order against you, government has the right to take your gun from you. That was in a 6-5 vote, and my vote was critical there. As far as what we could do more inside the school, yesterday I was a judge at a school, and for a project they were doing, and I knocked on the door, and a student let me in. And there's a big problem there, and it's not the student's fault. We need to start readying the front offices of all of our schools, elementary school, middle schools, and high schools, and having certain types of drills and programs the way they did in the 60s when they were talking about nuclear attacks. When the bell rings between periods, teachers need to go out in the hallways, and they need to be assigned an entry point to the school. We need to make sure front office is trained, and there's constant episodes where, well, they're not episodes, that there's constant drilling so they know that somebody may be coming in and they know how to react to it. And that's what we need to do to make our schools safer.
Thank you, Ms. Allman.
Yes, in 1996, way before I was elected to office, I helped create the School Resource Officer Program, and I've been involved in that since. At that time, we had 2 officers, one at Milford Mill and one at Pikesville High. Today, we are over 80 officers. And the key to having police in schools is training. And NASRO does the training where they are police officers first, they are mentors and counselors, and they are also teachers. We have training sessions in Maryland all the time and across the United States. Baltimore County is a model for this program. We do teach staff members, we do teach principals and administration. This is an overall program that helps to keep children safe, and that is certainly a priority of mine as county executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough.
We do have SROs, law enforcement officers, in high schools and middle schools in Baltimore County. I will place them in all 108 elementary schools. I will have legislation passed that the authority for student conduct policy comes under the county executive and the police department. The police tell me that they have problem people, violent people. They turn it over to the principal, and the principal says, okay, no consequences. There are children being harmed in our school system every single day. I have teamed up with a group called Parents to Parents, over 1,000 parents who have complaints, and we will be issuing a special program and ideas. But I will take control of that. The police will take control of it, and there will be zero tolerance. We're also going to put in place what is called TS, Total Security, which are hard buildings with new technology, latest scientific technology to protect our schools. We will reposition the patrols in the area to make frequent stops and visits at the schools. And we are going to make safety our top priority. And if you're going to come to our schools and you're going to do something and be a bad kid, you're going to have consequences. You're not going to be in the mainstream with the good kids. We're going to put you where you don't cause problems. And we have too much of that. And I hear these complaints every single day. Enough is enough. It's got to stop.
Thank you. And thank you for answering all of our questions. This brings us now to our closing statements. You each have 2 minutes, and we're going to start with Mr. Brochin.
Thank you for hosting this. For 16 years, I've been the voice of my district. I have amplified their concerns. We've done some really worthwhile things. I was the Senate sponsor for an elected school board for Baltimore County, and we're going to see the fruits of that in the fall.